lumière du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
But the big picture for us is still very bad. I mean, the story overall of coronavirus in the world now remains the massive size of America's epidemic, the national level federal failure of the U.S. to handle this responsibly, and the way it has therefore run away with us as a country. There are currently more than 425,000 cases in the United States. That's bigger than the other three largest epidemics on Earth combined. More than 14,500 Americans have died. 1,916 of them have died in the last day, which means one American is dying on average every 45 seconds from coronavirus. And still, it's this patchwork response. Still, there are U.S. states that don't think it's a big deal and haven't had any national instruction to take it any more seriously, so they're not. The Arkansas governor, Asa Hutchinson, now insisting that not only will there be no statewide stay-at-home order in Arkansas, he is overtly blocking any county or city in Arkansas from initiating their own measures to slow the virus. He is stopping them from doing so if they want to. In Arkansas, they've already hit about 1,000 cases. They're already about to hit 1,000 cases. Maybe they just want to see how high they can go. In Iowa, they're already over 1,000 cases, over 20% of whom are health workers. The Iowa Medical Board begging Governor Kim Reynolds for a statewide stay-at-home order. But Iowa's governor is refusing that too because, okay, sure, why not? In Kansas, the Democratic governor there, Laura Kelly, did institute a statewide stay-at-home order and a ban on large gatherings. Today, Republicans in the Kansas state legislature overturned the ban on large gatherings. Apparently because they want Kansans gathering together in large numbers right now. I mean, Republicans in every state don't have their heads screwed on the same way about this. You're seeing that in Kansas. You're seeing stuff like what we've seen from the Republican governors in Iowa and Arkansas. I get it. But for example, Maryland's Republican governor, Larry Hogan, is going the opposite direction. Today, he, for example, formed a multi-agency strike force to try to help out the dozens of nursing homes and long-term care facilities in Maryland that have coronavirus cases already. Maryland has a stay-at-home order. Maryland has asked for ventilators from other states. Maryland is now acting as best it can to try to approach the devastating problem in these congregate living facilities that are so vulnerable to this virus. That seems good. Because nursing homes have been hit so hard everywhere in the country, of course, there ought to be national guidance and national effort and assistance here for those incredibly critical, vulnerable populations and facilities. But this federal government doesn't do that. The Trump administration doesn't do things like that. I mean, there also ought to be a national testing plan, but this administration doesn't do that either. The Washington Post today with a devastating report on how every state is still just doing for themselves when it comes to testing. Even now, even 3 months into this thing. There ought to be national guidance on how to limit the spread of the virus through stay-at-home policies and social distancing. But states are still making that up as they go, too, with no federal direction, including some states just deciding to not do it at all because the White House hasn't told them they should. But here's what all that looks like in the end for us. I just have one more thing to show you here. Here's what this looks like. This animated graphic I'm about to show you was produced by the BBC. And they are using data here from Johns Hopkins University. And what you're going to see here is a graphic that shows the progression of how the coronavirus pandemic spread throughout the world. This thing is only about 40 seconds. It is worth watching the whole thing. I particularly want you to watch when the part at the bottom of your screen, the part that shows the time frame that we're in, I want you to particularly watch when it gets to the very beginning of March. Okay? All right, let's start it. So as you can see, by late January, China was dealing with an explosive outbreak. But even as that country started to grapple with tens of thousands of cases, the rest of the world remained largely unscathed. By late February, however, there's South Korea, there's Italy, there's Iran, all reporting thousands of cases. And now here, watch what happens at the beginning of March. Look at the speed at which the U.S. epidemic starts to take off. By the end of March, we have surpassed everyone. And from that point on, cases in the U.S. continue to grow with astonishing speed by the thousands and then by the tens of thousands, and nobody is even close. That is the proof in the pudding. That is the data that shows a failed national response, the worst failed national response on earth, right? How our response is an international disaster because of the way our unchecked, unmitigated spread of the virus now dominates the pandemic worldwide and dominates the human prevalence of this virus on earth. I mean, patchwork, late, denialist, fantasist, uncoordinated, inept, unscientific confusion in national policy leads to a runaway disaster. I mean, we do have to build on the few places that have been getting it right in our country and learn from them. And we need to support the places that are being overrun. But at 500,000 cases now in our country and nearly 2,000 American deaths every day now, this has run off with us.
It is Thursday, the 9th of April of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, speaking of spice, the campaign rallies continue apace, disguised as pandemic response pressers, by the way. And I'm just wondering when the telecom companies, the media, when is the media going to start charging for these campaign speeches? Normally, when you have a campaign ad, you have to pay. I remember when Trump was running in 2016, he got a lot of free press. And he's going to get it now, too? All right. Well, when we talk about complicity, I think that if you look it up, you might find U.S. media right there with the Russian media. All right. Well, he had a little bit of pushback yesterday by Acosta from CNN. I'd like to see more of that. Of course, I think Acosta will be banned from the White House press room because they got to have room for that OANN woman. Yeah. Oh, and there's some speculation that Trump will pardon Joe Exotic, the Tiger King. Oh, my God. We're in a pandemic that surpasses the 1918-1919 pandemic, and they're asking about Joe Exotic. New York Post, is that why your headlines look like that in Comic Sans? And let me just put in also, Trump keeps calling the pandemic of 1918. Oh, yeah, it happened in 1917. It was 1918, 1919. Come on. The guy can't get anything right. Talks about how he stopped travel from China, and he didn't. Jeez. Fox has gone back to belittling the tests, the results, the totals of people infected and who have died. The miracle drug, the hydroquinone or whatever it is, it's even being pushed by Bill Barr. He says the media has a jihad against it, and yet the CDC itself had to take down its recommendation as pushed by Trump about the usage of this drug because too many people have been dying from it. And if they don't die, they're in extreme agony. Trump touted about how many millions of the pills of this drug that the United States has stockpiled. Well, good. Give it to the lupus patients. That's who it's for. And anti-malaria. But still, we're taking medicine away from lupus patients to fulfill some fantasy that Trump heard on Fox. And now Bill Barr's in on it, too. Of course, Bill Barr's been in on it from the very beginning when he wrote his query letter. If I was your AG, this is how I would do it. And he has. That's why I continue to rant. John Mitchell, Bill Barr, now more than ever. Now more than ever. Yes, John Mitchell was sent to a federal prison for a number of years after he was AG, but I don't want to wait that long. I really don't. Oh, I apologize. I have a little bit of a stuffed up nose. There's something, they say it was grass pollen, but something hit me this morning and I've just been sneezing up a storm, and so I'm trying to stifle those sneezes without using any, drugs with zinc in it. That was the other thing Trump is telling everybody to take zinc. Where did he come up with the zinc? Well, Airborne has zinc, okay? And there's been a home remedy where the use of zinc ostensibly is supposed to coat the membranes in your nose or your body so you can't catch the cold virus, which is called coronavirus, by the way. So I think that's where he got the idea of zinc. It's been, when I was a little kid, the idea of taking zinc, it was pushed by a lot of, I think what they called them back in the day, holistic medicine people. Well, holistic medicine is actually a good thing, but quackery is not. There's a lot of quackery in supplements. Did you know also that hydrochloroquine is made by Sandoz? Gee, if I'd known that, I would have probably said, oh yeah, let's take it. You never know. It might be some ergot. Some ergot might have got in there by mistake, and that would be fun. Yeah, I guess if you have like a massive headache while you're having a heart attack, you get to have a really good trip. I don't know. It sounds like a bad trip to me. So, Sweden has stopped their studies, their testing on the drug because of people dying. So they had to stop that test. I don't think that particular drug is going to work except for the people it was prescribed to in the very beginning, like lupus. Okay, it works great on lupus. Oh, the woman who is married, Loeffler, who is married to the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, well, the company that owns the New York Stock Exchange, is now going to sell all of her stocks, or she's going to get rid of them because, well, she got caught. And now she's blaming just the fake news for catching her, I guess. I don't think it was the fake news that caught her. But I think just regular reporting. She has to report. And it was from those reports. I don't know if it was reporters even that discovered it. Of course they did. But everybody loves to blame a reporter for, well, when I say everybody in the Trump administration loves to blame a reporter for any inequity that they may have been caught in. How dare you, fake news. Why don't you trump my great accomplishments? Well, I would if you had any. Of course, the great accomplishment of, 16 million unemployed this week total? And it might be higher than that. Because Trump doesn't want these numbers to hurt his reelection. I think just his behavior at his campaign speeches disguised as a pandemic response presser is enough to hurt his chances, but I'm a romantic. Apparently, his psychophants think that he's the great leader. Even Barr said that he's acted so statesmanlike. That's how you know that Bill Barr is a lying shill. There's nothing ever statesmanlike about Donald Trump. When you're making jokes about banging models during a supposed presser on the pandemic, and they're showing graphs, and you make some sort of stupid joke, an infantile pre-adolescent joke. Well, if you're infantile, that's definitely pre-adolescent. But the stupid junior high school joke about, I've been in a lot of models. What a child. And apparently his loyalists consider that to be statesmanlike. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, at the top, that was Rachel pointing out how the failed federal response to COVID-19 has manifested into an international disaster. So I don't think we can really call it the Chinese virus anymore. We'll have to call it something else. I don't know, Make America Sick Again virus. Then on the rest of the menu, federal supplies of protective medical equipment are nearly depleted. Nice. Even Wyoming's GOP governor admitted his state's extreme abortion bill will, quote, harm people, end quote. And the House Intel Committee called on Trump's acting spy chief to explain the spate of firings and resignations of top Intel officials. Well, Trump only takes intelligence reports from Russia anyway. He doesn't need our guys getting in the way. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where state-backed hackers and online criminals are taking advantage of the coronavirus outbreak to further their operations. And OXFAM says the pandemic could plunge 500 million people into poverty. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Link, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And thank you to those of you who have become regular and new Patreons of Netroots Radio. Your recurring contribution helps us pay our bills and, of course, get the software for the newest machinery that we have identified. Thank you so much for that generosity. You know, we've been broadcasting 24/7, 365 for 9 years. A little over now. So your generosity has allowed us to be able to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, oh so many decades ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And then get that linked up on social media, except for Facebook for, I don't know, another 5 days? Next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, I think they're going to allow me to come back until I get suspended for some statement I made last year again. How does that work? And let's see. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Wow. Okay, let's dive into this first offering here, because we have a curated show, and obviously, the riffs aren't curated. Michael Biesecker of the Associated Press brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The strategic national stockpile is nearly out of the N95 respirators, surgical masks, face shields, gowns, and other medical supplies desperately needed to protect frontline medical workers treating coronavirus patients. So what better time to fire the IG that would be overseeing this? And the so-called stimulus bill. You know, there's like, what, 600 or 650 billion that's carved out of that package that no one knows where it's going. Is that how much Trump owes Vlad? I don't know. How does this work? Well, I'll tell you how it works. You got a Bill Barr covering your A. Well, back to this issue. The Department of Human and Health Services told the AP yesterday, Wednesday, that the federal stockpile was in the process of deploying all remaining personal protective equipment in its inventory. Just as Vlad wanted, apparently. The HHS statement confirms federal documents released on Wednesday by the House Oversight and Reform Committee showing that about 90% of the personal protective equipment in the stockpile has been distributed to state and local governments, except they haven't. They've been released to third-party vendors so somebody makes some money that they can kick up to the big man in the Oval Office. Spokeswoman Katie McCoff said the remaining 10% will be kept in reserve to support federal response efforts. House Oversight Committee Chairwoman Carolyn B. Maloney, of course a Democrat from New York, said in a statement that the Trump administration is leaving states to scour the open market for scarce supplies, often competing with each other and federal agencies in a chaotic bidding war that drives up prices, and then Trump and his federal pirates take the supplies away from the states before they get delivered. Of course, Trump has faulted the states for not better preparing for the pandemic and said they should only be relying on the federal stockpile as a last resort because Trump himself said he's not a shipping clerk. Needham of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro, Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. In a surprising move, Wyoming's staunch anti-abortion governor, Republican Mark Gordon, recently vetoed a bill that targets later abortions. The Wyoming legislature passed an abortion bill in early March that would have required doctors to provide medical treatment, in the bill's words, any viable infant aborted alive, even though there was no chance for its survival. What? But as Gordon noted when vetoing the bill, laws already in place protect children from being denied life-saving care. Gordon also said he blocked the law because it will, quote, harm people it never intended to harm. Parents who want a child but have received the devastating news that their pregnancy is not viable, end quote. The governor expressed concern that the bill would interfere in the relationship between patients and their doctor, saying it could, quote, eliminate the opportunity for a child to pass away in the loving arms of parents, end quote, and instead require a situation where, quote, the child might still pass away in the midst of stressful, painful, and futile efforts to resuscitate, end quote. Republicans at the state and federal levels have been fixated on passing so-called born-alive abortion bills, which purport to protect a child born in the process of an abortion. In reality, these bills are unnecessary. As attorney and professor Neil Siegel told PolitiFact, there is no lack of statutory or constitutional law that would protect babies through a live birth or a failed abortion. But the bills can work as an intimidation tool against abortion providers, chipping away at their role in helping patients decide what is best for them, while often threatening substantial penalties. Wyoming's bill that was vetoed threatened both doctors and parents with a potential felony charge if they were considered in violation of the law. Opponents of born alive bills argue that they're designed to make it harder for people to have abortions and to stigmatize those people who choose to have a later abortion. Dr. Kristen Brandy, an advocate for physicians with Physicians for Reproductive Health, said that these bills and these types of legislation maligns and vilifies providers and patients to push a false narrative about abortion later in pregnancy. Brandy, who is also an abortion provider, said she had never even heard of a case of a child born after an attempted abortion. Wyoming has faced increased attacks on abortion rights in recent years. Two anti-abortion bills implemented in 2017 were the first to pass in the state in 30 years, according to Better Wyoming. Reproductive rights research organization Guttmacher Institute reports that the state has only 2 abortion providers as of 2017. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The House Intel Committee on Tuesday called on Trump's acting spy chief to explain the removals and resignations of top Intel officials and whether he ever tried to block probes by the Intel community's recently fired internal watchdog. Democrat Adam Schiff also wrote in a letter that the panel will examine whether any of Acting Director of National Intelligence Richard Grenell's staff interfered with the production and dissemination of intelligence for a March 10th congressional briefing on election interference. The letter to Grenell, a fierce Trump loyalist who also serves as U.S. ambassador to Germany, who they hate him, set the stage for a fresh confrontation with a president still fuming over his December impeachment by the Democratic-led House of Representatives on charges of abuse of office and obstruction of justice. Schiff was the lead manager in that effort, for those of you who may have forgotten. The Republican majority Senate in January acquitted Trump of the charges stemming from his attempt to pressure Ukraine to probe former Vice President Joe Biden, the leading Democratic challenger to Trump's reelection in November, and his son Hunter, obviously to deflect from all the crimes the Trump crime family has committed. Obviously. Grenell said on Twitter that Schiff's letter went to the media before he received it, and adding, "These press leaks politicizing the intelligence community must stop." Well, stop doing it then, Grenell. Trump in January named Grenell, who has no intelligence experience, acting director of national intelligence, the overseer of all 17 U.S. intel agencies. Grenell ordered a hiring freeze and a review that officials said is aimed at improving resource and personnel uses. But some lawmakers and former intelligence officials expressed concerns that Grenell was targeting officers whose analyses differed with the views of Trump, And of course, we know that Trump has clashed with the U.S. intelligence agencies because he believes Vlad, not us. And no one wonders why. In this reporter's opinion, of course, the Intelligence Committee, Schiff wrote, is concerned that Grinnell is pursuing changes without seeking congressional authorization. This effort appears to be proceeding despite the coronavirus pandemic and amid indications of political interference in the production and dissemination of intelligence, Schiff wrote. The committee also is concerned, he said, by the removals or departures of all Senate-confirmed ODNI officials, all of them. Schiff said Grinnell has to explain those actions in writing by April 16th next week. He set the same deadline for Grinnell to disclose whether he blocked any investigations by Michael Atkinson, whose firing by Trump last week as the Inspector General for the intelligence community the committee is reviewing. Trump said Atkinson did a terrible job by sending to Congress the whistleblower complaint that led to his impeachment, calling it fake, and yet Atkinson was merely following the law, and a mobster hates it when cops follow the law. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from the break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, getting the job done. Danielle Crudy and Bridget Savage Cole first connected doing DIY film projects in New York City. They held each other's cameras for a couple of years before deciding to write together. But to write about what? Well, they were both Catholic, they both loved their mothers, and they were both obsessed with the ocean. And from these seeds and 8 years of work came the wonderful fictional winter fishing town of Easter Cove, Maine, the setting for Crudy and Cole's first feature, Blow the Man Down. It's 2019, and Mary Margaret Connolly has just died, and her death sets off events for two groups of survivors. One is a trio of friends and under-the-radar matriarchs who are now free to take care of an increasingly unsavory element in the town. The other is her pair of young adult daughters, Mary Beth, who put off college for her mother's decline, now eager to get the hell out of town, and Priscilla, burdened with a stack of medical bills, an underperforming family fish shop, and a house she can't afford. In an early shot, Crudy and Cole pan across the harbor only to have a distant car catch the camera's motion and become the shot's focus. This move is nice, but with cinematographer Todd Benhazi, Crudy and Cole's strength in Blow the Man Down lies not so much in camera work, but in camera placement, in film texture, and in the mise-en-scène that arises organically when you're making do with what you have and suddenly discover a cool location, like when a scene originally written on a houseboat becomes a chase through a maze of lobster traps. Crudy and Cole's strength is also in the characters they've crafted and the performances they've captured. Still, that early shot is an apt metaphor for a movie that says, no, the story's actually over here, with these women who are usually in the background. Here's what it's like from their perspective when a body washes up on the beach. Oh, and Blow the Man Down has sea shanties. Oh my, are there sea shanties. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Wade Gibbs. The COVID-19 pandemic has a lot of people stuck at home with their cats, which raises some obvious questions. Can cats catch the new coronavirus from their owners? Can cats spread the disease to each other? And can people get infected by their cats? Scientists have been so busy studying human-to-human transmission of the virus that few so far have looked at how it may be able to spread among cats and the humans they live with. But a few preliminary reports within the past few days suggest that cats can catch COVID-19, probably from humans, and then give it to other cats. On April 5th, the Bronx Zoo announced that 4 tigers and 3 lions have developed symptoms of the disease. Scientists at Cornell University and the USDA tested samples from one of the tigers and confirmed that it was infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And researchers at the University of Illinois looked at the samples and found that the virus in the tiger was genetically indistinguishable from strains seen in humans. So the tiger must have caught this from a zookeeper, which is a little surprising. I mean, I would think 6 feet would be a minimum safe distance from a tiger under any circumstance. But perhaps someone coughed on her food. COVID-19 doesn't seem to be limited to big cats either. 2 research groups in China recently published studies on house cats in Wuhan and young cats raised in a lab. These preprints have not yet been peer-reviewed, and this is very early science that may well change with further study. That said, their findings are worrisome. The Wuhan study did blood tests on 102 cats there to see whether they had antibodies to SARS-CoV-2, which would mean that they had been infected with the virus at some point. 15% of the cats tested positive. 3 of those had been living with people who were diagnosed with COVID-19. The rest of the cats were strays or had been in pet hospitals. The authors write that immediate action should be implemented to keep a suitable distance between humans and companion animals such as cats, and strict hygiene and quarantine measures should also be carried out for these animals. In a second study, scientists at a high-containment lab for animal diseases control in Harbin, China, deliberately squirted coronavirus into the noses of cats and other kinds of animals to see whether they became infected. In some good news, they did not see the virus taking hold in dogs, pigs, chickens, or ducks, but it did replicate rapidly in the respiratory tracts of both cats and ferrets. Within a few days after infection, all of the cats they inoculated started shedding virus in their feces. The researchers placed an uninfected cat in a cage adjacent to each infected one. 1/3 of those healthy cats then caught the virus from their sick neighbors. So far, the CDC says, there's no evidence that people can catch COVID-19 from their cats. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So until it's clearer whether the virus can leap back from cats to their owners, it would seem smart to keep your cats indoors, to wear gloves and a mask when changing the litter box, and to avoid kissing or rubbing noses with your little schnookums. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Wade Gibbs.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Persuaded that his election would help cement support for the new government, George Washington reluctantly agreed to serve as the nation's first president. He likened his feelings on once again taking up the burdens of public service to those of a culprit who is going to the place of his execution. Washington was inaugurated first president of the United States on April 30th, 1789. He served 2 terms, guiding the new government through the organization of the executive branch, founding the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., opening the West for settlement, and establishing precedents that have influenced the conduct of succeeding presidents ever since. Constitutions do not become real without the institutions necessary to implement them. It fell primarily to Washington to give flesh and blood to the executive branch and the national government generally during the first critical years. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day that Minneapolis Teachers Union Local 59 went out on strike. They took the vote to strike despite the fact that state law prohibited teachers from striking. But after months of negotiations that went nowhere, the teachers decided it was time to act. The main issue for the strike was wages. One teacher, George Kimball, recalled why he had supported the strike, stating, "The wages were so low. I had 5 children at the time, and we could barely survive. We couldn't take it anymore." The strike lasted 14 days. The teachers did not win the gains they hoped for with their work action, but their strike drew public attention to the lack of bargaining rights for public sector workers. The next year, Minnesota Governor Wendell Anderson signed into law the Public Employees Labor Relations Act. This act granted public sector workers the right to collective bargaining. The Minneapolis teachers' strike played a key role in Minnesota's public sector workers gaining the fundamental right of union representation. The 1960s and 70s saw a wave of teacher strikes across the nation as educators stood up for themselves as workers. Across the country, there were more than 1,000 teacher strikes between 1960 and 1974. More than 750,000 teachers walked out of the classroom and onto the picket lines. By the end of the 1970s, more than 70% of public school teachers were covered by collective bargaining agreements. For teachers concerned about class size, pensions, wages, school safety, and the quality of education, the strike remains an important way to build solidarity and to show the power of our nation's educators.
The news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Senator Bernie Sanders announced Wednesday that he was suspending his campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination.
But as I see the crisis gripping the nation, exacerbated by a president unwilling or unable to provide any kind of credible leadership, and the work that needs to be done to protect people in this most desperate hour, I cannot in good conscience continue to mount a campaign that cannot win and which would interfere with the important work required of all of us in this difficult hour.
Today, Senator Bernie Sanders announced he was dropping out of the 2020 Democratic race. I guess during a pandemic, crazy ideas like Medicare for all just don't resonate. Bernie addressed his supporters this afternoon in a live stream.
I want to thank the many hundreds of thousands of Americans who attended our rallies, town meetings, and house parties from New York to California. Some of these events had over 25,000 people, some had a few hundred, and some had a dozen.
You know, listening to Bernie Sanders makes me nostalgic for a time in America when anything seemed possible, like having a dozen people in a room. Bernie was grateful for everyone who contributed to his grassroots movement.
I want to thank the 2 million Americans who have contributed financially to our campaign. Thank you for your 10 million contributions, averaging $18.50.
$18.50, which I am told these days is enough to get you half a Clorox wipe. I'm going to miss that. Sanders made sure his supporters knew that the fight for economic justice is far from over.
Nelson Mandela, one of the great freedom fighters in modern world history, famously said, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it is done."
To which Joe Biden replied, "Hey, my old buddy Nelson Mandela, you know, I got arrested with him once in Wakanda." Then Bernie broke the hard news as gently as he could.
"I wish I could give you better news, but I think you know the truth. And that is that we are now some 300 delegates behind Vice President Biden, and the path toward victory is virtually impossible."
Bernie Sanders is saying Bernie Sanders can't win. Man, he is going to catch hell from Bernie Sanders supporters.
To those Democrats who were not Bernie Sanders supporters, allow for a mourning period, please. The United States saw a record 1,922 coronavirus deaths on Wednesday, up from the previous high of 1,858 set Tuesday. New York also reported its highest 24-hour coronavirus death toll for the second straight day, with 779 deaths. Governor Andrew Cuomo said it was a very real possibility that deaths were being undercounted because some people were dying at home. But there has been a decline in new COVID-19 cases. One model used to track the outbreak estimated last week that more than 90,000 people would die from COVID-19 in the U.S. by August. But on Wednesday, it dropped the estimate to just over 60,000. The right-wing idiots who dominate television and radio are saying it was all overblown. But Dr. Deborah Birx, the White House coronavirus response coordinator, said the drop showed that social distancing and stay-at-home policies were working. But there's no denying the scary trends. Just look at how the number of Americans who've died has almost doubled over the course of this week alone. On Monday morning, the total number reported was 9,648. On Tuesday, it was 10,993. Wednesday, 12,911. And on Thursday, that number had jumped to 14,808. While we're talking numbers, 6.6 million more people filed for unemployment benefits last week. The 3-week, truly shocking toll now stands at 16.6 million Americans who have filed for unemployment compensation. As a reminder, before this crisis, the record for claims in a single week was 695,000. Now, as bad as these unemployment claims are, the true number is probably much larger, given reports from around the country that state unemployment offices are overwhelmed. People can't get through. Here in Florida, where I live, they've set up drive-up stations to pick up a paper application. Yeah. As you've likely discovered by now, Donald Trump's standard response to anything that doesn't go his way is to blame everyone else. The AP's Jonathan Lemire assembled the targets on whom the orange one has attempted to place the blame for the spread of the virus here in the U.S. Quote, "First, it was the media that was at fault. Then Democratic governors came under fire. China, President Barack Obama, and federal watchdogs have all had a turn in the crosshairs. And now it's the World Health Organization that's to blame?" Yep, Trump started attacking the WHO in earnest on Tuesday.
The WHO, that's the World Health Organization, they've been wrong about a lot of things. And they had a lot of information early. They called it wrong. They missed the call. They could have called it months earlier. They would have known. And they should have known. And they probably did know.
And on Wednesday, Trump said the administration will freeze $452 million in appropriations to support public health efforts by the World Health Organization while investigating its stance with China and the pandemic. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, responded.
The focus of all political parties should be to save their people. Please don't politicize this virus. It exploits the differences you have at the national level. If you want to be exploited, and if you want to have many more body bags, then you do it.
Tedros didn't respond to Trump by name, but stressed the importance of working together to fight a common public health threat. Nearly 1.5 million coronavirus cases have been confirmed worldwide. The pandemic has been blamed already for 88,567 deaths. And just to prove that we know so little about this novel coronavirus, the New York Times is out with a new report that casts doubts on the timeline of the spread of the virus, saying that new research indicates that the coronavirus began to circulate in the New York area by mid-February, weeks before the first confirmed case, and that travelers brought in the virus mainly from Europe, not Asia. The more you know. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and The Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. While you're there, please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit. We are expecting a high of around 80 with abundant sunshine, winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-40s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tomorrow we are going to be mainly sunny. Looks like we're only going to be in the mid-70s tomorrow rather than in the upper 70s. And the winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. We have one more case of coronavirus confirmed in Jackson County, Oregon, here in Southern Oregon. And it is now at 40, still with no deceased. And that is good news in and of itself. Grass pollen is rated high, and I ought to know. Can you tell? I'm a little stuffed up. The air quality index remains good at 24 parts per million in the region, and the daytime UV index is high at 6, so put on the highest SPF you can find if you happen to be in an area where the UV index is high at 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.03 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 77%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 71 and sunny, with their prime minister apparently doing a little better, but he's in his third, going on fourth day in the ICU. Paris is 78 and sunny with lots of coronavirus. Rome is 69 and sunny, and they're having infection rates of people who have already been infected and recovered, and now they're testing positive again with coronavirus. Kyiv is 69 and sunny with coronavirus. Kabul is 55 and partly cloudy with coronavirus. Hong Kong is 66 and clear with another resurgence of reinfections of coronavirus. Tokyo is 47 and mostly cloudy, and it looks like they're going to have a nationwide shutdown because of coronavirus. Sydney, Australia is 64 and cloudy, and they're taking extreme measures because of coronavirus. San Francisco, California is 51 and cloudy with coronavirus. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, continuing to have too much coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. and these people positively live around the world. Gabrielle Sauter of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. American and British cybersecurity officials are warning that state-backed hackers and online criminals are taking advantage of coronavirus outbreaks to further their operations, echoing concerns from digital safety experts. A joint advisory published yesterday, Wednesday, by the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, along with Britain's National Cybersecurity Center, said that while the overall volume of malicious activity does not appear to have changed, hackers of all varieties were leveraging anxiety around the disease outbreak to push people into clicking links and downloading attachments. Bad actors are using these difficult times to exploit and take advantage of the public and business, Brian Ware, Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at CISA, said in a statement. The agencies warned that hackers were also exploiting growing demand for work-from-home solutions by passing off their malicious tools as remote collaboration software produced by Zoom and Microsoft. Hackers are also targeting the virtual private networks that are allowing an increasing number of employees to connect to their offices. The cybersecurity industry has been sounding the alarm for weeks over the threat of coronavirus-themed malicious software and booby-trapped emails. In a blog post also published yesterday, Wednesday, Microsoft executive Robert Leffert said there had been an uptick in the success rate for hackers. The media was all COVID-19 all the time, Leffert said. It's overwhelming, and attackers know it. They know many are clicking without looking because stress levels are high, and these crooks are taking advantage of that.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Karen Strohacker of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The fallout from the coronavirus spread that has killed more than 83,000 people and wreaked havoc on economies around the world could push around 500 million people into poverty, OXFAM said today. The report, released by the Nairobi-based charity ahead of next week's International Monetary Fund World Bank annual meeting, calculated the impact of the crisis on global poverty due to shrinking household incomes or consumption. The economic crisis that is rapidly unfolding is deeper than the 2000 global financial crisis, the report found. The estimates show that regardless of the scenario, global poverty could increase for the first time since 1990, it said, adding that this could throw some countries back to poverty levels last seen over 3 decades ago. Mobsters always play catch-up, and leaders lead. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio's got a broadcast on, and we'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.